I have a controversial take. A trade up in the top 5 of the 2026 NFL draft should be off the table for the Jets. Yes, even for a quarterback they love. I'll explain today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, November 26th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day, and thanking you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. A big shout out to you everydayers. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. On today's show, we have our weekly mailbag. Each Wednesday, we try and do a mailbag with listener questions. It's a busy show today. We'll talk about whether the Jets might consider converting Justin Fields to a new position. We'll talk about whether the Jets should consider drafting a player in the top 10, even if he doesn't play a premium position. But let's begin by talking about quarterback. And I think most of us know the New York Jets are very, very likely to pick a quarterback in next spring's NFL draft. And if they don't do that, they'll almost certainly do it a year later in 2027, a year where they will have 3 first-round picks. Our first question is, John, what do you think about the idea of the Jets potentially trading up for a quarterback this year? They certainly have the draft capital to do it and not leave themselves shorthanded. A quarterback could transform this franchise. So I think that a trade up should almost certainly be off the table. And I think there are lots of reasons for that. And I know this is going to be a controversial take, but I want to go back to the last statement. A quarterback could transform the franchise. I think the Jets need to get themselves out of that mindset. I think that that's been a mindset that's been prevalent in this franchise for a really long time. It's what led to the Aaron Rodgers trade. It's what led to all the early picks used on quarterbacks and not surrounding them with the correct amount of talent. Look, if you hit on a quarterback and he turns into a top 5 guy, yes, it can change the franchise, but we also need to consider how likely that is. And it's far more likely that even if you draft a guy who has the potential to be a top 5 guy down the line, you're going to need to develop him. And developing him means that you need to put the right pieces around him. And all these extra picks the Jets have give them an opportunity to put the pieces around the quarterback in a way they have not done in the past. And if you start trading up, you're really depleting the resources that you've got to put the right pieces around the quarterback. When you trade up in the top 5, you typically have to overpay. It's typically a pretty major overpay relative to what the draft chart says. And look, I've always said I'm not a big fan of the draft chart, but that's what teams use. So that's kind of the price. But I mean, if you look at recent examples of teams trading up in the top 5, into the top 5, there was the Bryce Young trade between Carolina and Chicago, where the Panthers sent 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a legitimate number 1 receiver in DJ Moore out of town. You've got the San Francisco 49ers trading up for Trey Lance. They moved up from 12 to 3, deal with the Miami Dolphins. They gave up 3 first-round picks and a third-round pick. We could go back to 2018. The Jets moved up from 6 to 3 for Sam Darnold, gave up their first-round pick and 3 second-round picks. And we could keep going. We talked about the Mitchell Trubisky trade. Bears traded up 1 slot. They gave up 2 3s and a 4. You want to go back to 2016. You talk about the Eagles moving up from 8 to 2 for Carson Wentz, which involved multiple first-round picks. It involved a second-round pick. It involved a third-round pick, a fourth-round pick. We could talk about that same year, the Titans moving from 15 to 1 for Jared Goff, which was 2 1s, 2 2s, and 2 3s. These are enormous packages teams give up. And the other aspect of this is think about the examples I just mentioned. How many of those actually worked out for the team trading up? You could make a case, maybe the Rams with Goff, because they did go to a Super Bowl with him, and they were able to trade him as part of a package for Matthew Stafford. But there's not a lot of success there. I mean, the trade up for Wentz really did not work for the Eagles. I know he had that 1 year where they won the Super Bowl, but they won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. He once had a few good years. Trubisky was a complete failure, and you have to remember that they passed on Patrick Mahomes to take Trubisky Chicago. Darnold, of course, having success now, but did not have success with New York, in part because they sent out 3 second-round picks that could have been used to build the team up around Darnold. The Trey Lance deal did not work for San Francisco. The Bryce Young deal certainly doesn't look like it's working for Carolina, and also may have gifted the Bears their own franchise quarterback, because one of the picks the Panthers traded for Bryce Young turned into the pick the Bears used to draft Caleb Williams. And this underscores one of the key points against trading up, because the argument for trading up is always, well, a quarterback can change your franchise. And if you're sure about a guy, you got to go get him because quarterback's too important. And it's always something like, you'll never care about the picks if the quarterback pans out. If you're absolutely sure about a guy, you got to go get him. Okay, well, I think all of those teams were pretty sure about the quarterbacks they traded up for. And almost none of them work. You want to debate Goff one way or another, you can. So maybe we should be less sure about our quarterbacks. Maybe teams are a little overconfident in their ability to scout quarterbacks. And I think there are lots of reasons for that. I think that lots of coaches and GMs are kind of lazy, if we're going to be honest. I think they view hitting on a quarterback in a big way as kind of a cheat code. It's a cheat code to have a successful career. It's a shortcut to make sure that you don't get fired. Well, it only works if you develop the quarterback. Yeah, okay, if you get Joe Burrow comes in, you're set. But you can't count on your guy to be Joe Burrow right away. Quarterbacks need development. They need to be nurtured. And one of the things we always talk about on this show is you don't always the best quarterbacks aren't always the guys who are first off the board. And I think there are lots of reasons for that, but one of them is that the quarterbacks who end up being good tend to go to stable franchises who know how to develop them, who know how to get the best out of them. I think that too often teams get this complex where the quarterback's going to fix everything. And we've seen this over and over with the New York Jets. And I think, a lot of this comes directly from ownership, but it's been an ongoing story with this franchise for the last 2 decades, where they always think that they're just a quarterback away. Earlier in the season, I was adamantly opposed to the Jets drafting a quarterback because I did not see how they could put the quarterback in the right circumstances to succeed. The Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams trades for me were game changers because they added 4 premium picks on top of the picks the Jets already owned. So now with 8 premium picks going forward in the next 2 years, and by premium, I'm defining a first and second round picks, you can build a really strong offense. And in addition to that, trading Sauce and Quinnen did clear up quite a bit of cap space. The Jets went from a situation where they'd be able to maneuver some this offseason to a situation where they're going to have quite a bit of cap space. And that's true even with all the dead money they've got on the books next year. And they have a lot of dead money next year. Aaron Rodgers is still going to count for like $34 million. CJ Mosley is going to be expensive next year. Jets are going to have a lot of dead money. But over the next 2 years, they got a lot of money coming off the books, a lot of draft picks coming in. And those give you the resources to properly develop the quarterback. Now, you may say, well, with all the cap space and all the picks, they'll still have ample resources. You know what? That brings me to my next point. And that's, I don't know how you look at these quarterbacks in this year's class and say that there's some singular prospect. I mean, at best, you're taking an educated guess. And this is one of the things teams get themselves into trouble with, is they get too sure about their evaluations. The NFL draft is something that should require humility. Even the greats mess up. Did you know that the general manager who picked Ryan Leaf with the San Diego Chargers in 1998 is in the Hall of Fame? Bobby Beathard, a great executive. He made one of the worst picks of all time. Everybody misses. And what teams should be doing is building in a margin for error. Instead of giving up ample resources, teams should be stockpiling picks. Instead of giving up resources, teams should be stockpiling picks. Teams should be giving themselves multiple opportunities to get things right. And I think that you want as many resources as you can, because if we're going to be honest, the Jets are not going to go 8 for 8 on these first and second round picks, but they don't need to build a successful team. If you trade these picks away, you need to hit on a higher percentage of your picks to build around the quarterback. You're just making life more difficult on yourself. The Jets have put themselves into a good position with all the resources they have, but you don't want to throw those away. It's very easy to get enticed by the cliches out there. You got to go get your guy if you're sure about it. This quarterback can change everything. In reality, the best thing to do is get a quarterback with talent and then nurture him. And doing that, the best way to do it is to keep your picks. Now, ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about the Jets maybe going in a different direction. What if there's no quarterback? What if there's no player available at all at a premium position? Should the Jets consider drafting maybe even a safety in the top 10? I have some thoughts on that, and I'll tell you what they are as we continue here on this Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Peloton. Look, folks, it's time to break through the busiest time of the year with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus that's powered by Peloton IQ. It's Peloton's most elevated technology and equipment yet that gives you real-time guidance, and it gives you endless ways to move, whether you want to work out by yourself or if you want to work out with your favorite instructor, like my personal favorite, Alex Toussaint. He always gets me fired up to tackle the day. And the thing I like about Peloton, it helps me achieve more in less times. They have features that help you plan, stay motivated, track your progress, and Peloton IQ also provides personalized workout plans and recommendations. That's something that I use right now during the busiest time of the year covering the NFL. They plan my workouts for me based on my mood, my vibe, and also my favorite instructors. So make sure you check it out and use it, because it also helps you correct your form in real time, and it maximizes your reps. It counts your reps so that you can do it smarter, safer, and more efficient. Let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And a big shout out to you every day, as this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. We're doing our weekly mailbag show today. Let's continue now with our next question. John, regarding the 2026 draft, right now the Jets appear likely to be selecting between picks 3 and 5. It's quite possible the best player on the board may play a less premium position, such as Caleb Downs from Ohio State. If you were not able to find a trading partner, would you be willing to select Downs, or would you reach a bit for a much-needed quarterback or wide receiver? I'm thinking back to the Jamal Adams selection in 2017 and how a good player was not able to greatly impact the team's fortunes. However, the difference being this time, the team has more draft capital to work with. How would you proceed? There's still a lot of college football left to be played. Regular season's not even over yet. So as always, it depends on who's available at the time. But I'll give you some broad thoughts on how I view this. Number one, I would not say Jamal Adams did not impact the team's fortunes. And I think this is going to be a controversial take. If we're being honest, I think a lot of Jets fans kind of underrate what Jamal Adams did, because Jamal Adams conducted himself terribly here. He made himself into a villain. So people kind of underscore what Jamal Adams did. I mean, in 2019, the Jets went 7-9, and it was a very unimpressive 7-9. But Jamal Adams himself probably swung like 3 or 4 of those games with his play. And Jamal Adams was great that year. He was a big impact player. The reason the Jets traded him is that he just wanted out. There was a lot of bad blood between him and the coaching staff and the front office. I think some of which was his fault, some of which was the coaching staff and front office's fault. And also, I mean, Seattle offered a crazy package. That was the type of deal where even if Jamal Adams was not upset with them, the Jets, I don't think it was that he was a safety. I think it was the fact the Jets only had one great player, and they needed more resources because Mike McCagnon had left them depleted, and they got a package where that could help them rebuild their team. So they took it. As far as taking a safety in the top 5, I mean, that's a tough thing to do. I know the Jets did it at 6 in 2017. If you look through that 2017 draft, I mean, it was not a great class early on outside of, I know the Jets passed on Mahomes, but so did 10 other teams. But a lot of players around Adams were not great players. A lot of them really did not amount to much. So the way I generally view it is it's okay to draft a player at a non-premium position here or there. The bulk of your picks should be spent on premium positions, though. In the NFL, positions are not created equally. There are certain spots that drive winning more than others. Quarterback's obviously one of them. I think wide receiver's another. You could talk tackle. You can make a case guard is getting there because it's just hard to develop guards in today's NFL. You looked at the defensive side of the ball. It's edge rusher, it's corner, and then maybe defensive tackle. The spots that aren't as important are running back, the tight ends, linebacker, and safety. It's not that a great player at those positions does not change a game. It's just there are far fewer game-changing players. And it's also that competent players at these positions are relatively easy to find. If you think you found a great player at safety, you think you found like a transcendent safety, like one of the best safeties of his generation, I think you can justify it because, if you look back at what the Jets did in 2017, I mean, yeah, they should have picked Mahomes. If you look back, they picked Mahomes, but, I don't think that you would have been better off picking Corey Davis or John Ross, who were, highly picked receivers that year, even though they play premium positions. On some level, you have to scout the player, not the position. The last couple of years, I've been a skeptic on drafting a tight end early on, and I think I've changed my mind on that after you look at the year Brock Bowers had 2 years ago and you look at the year Tyler Warren's had in Indianapolis. I think as time goes on, you try and learn from your mistakes and get a little smarter. And maybe I was too quick to discount those guys. I think that the bulk of the Jets, these early picks, should be used on quarterback, wide receiver, maybe not tackle because the Jets are set at tackle, but maybe corner, edge rusher. But if there's an exceptional talent, a truly special player, like a guy who's viewed as like a once in a generation type talent, I think you consider it. And I think you especially consider it because you've got all the extra picks. So again, you've built in a margin for error here where even if you draft like the safety and the safety isn't as great as you were counting on him to be, there's still a lot of other picks you've got. I think that having the extra picks gives you flexibility to roll the dice on something like an exceptional safety prospect in a way you may not be comfortable with otherwise. So I think that you could justify it. Depends on the players available on the board. I mean, I think that if you're drafting safety, running back, linebacker, tight end over and over and over and high in the first round, then you're probably making a mistake. But everyone here and there, you make an exception for an exceptional prospect. I think that that's the sort of thing that you can live with. Next question, John. As we set our eyes on developing a quarterback of the future, I think it's important to get a stopgap veteran in the building this offseason. That way, the Jets will not be forced to reach for a guy they don't like. And if they do draft a quarterback, it will allow him time to develop on the sideline before stepping in. How does a reunion with Geno Smith sound? Every Raiders fan I know says they're dying to move on from him. His tenure in his tenure in Las Vegas has been awful, but he's playing behind a clearly terrible offensive line. That would not be a problem here. Plus, if it doesn't work out, you can cut him in 2027 with no cap hit. Sending a day 3 pick for Geno Smith. Is this a good plan or a great plan? I'll hang up and listen. It's not a great plan. I'm not sure it's a good plan. I think it's a plausible plan. I mean, so I looked at Geno's contract. It's only like $26 million, which the quarterback position these days is not a whole lot of money. I think there are a couple of questions I have. Number one, how steep is Geno's decline? Because he's been on a steady downward trajectory since his early days in Seattle, where he had a lot of success. I worry about that. He is getting up there in years. The bigger thing I worry about is, would he buy into a role where he's a mentor? That's one of the things you don't know. And this is not a Geno Smith thing. It's just more a thing where a guy who's become accustomed to being a starter. And I know Geno was a backup for the bulk of his career, but he spent some time now as a starting quarterback. He's used to being the guy where he is. It's always a difficult transition. Some guys can make it, some guys can't. Some guys are willing, some aren't. So I think the question for Geno, if you made that move, would be whether or not he would buy into the role. And it's not so much would he be a mentor, because I think most quarterbacks are very willing, especially when they're at the end of their career, to kind of show the young guy how to prepare, how to watch film, all that stuff. And I think there would be real value in someone like Geno Smith, who failed here as a rookie, failed with this team and then this market as a rookie, to kind of show the pitfalls to the young guy. The question is, would he be okay in a situation where he knew he could be benched, where if he plays poorly, the rookie's going in and he knows that things are not about him? If the answer is yes, I mean, I think it's like, I don't think it's the worst idea in the world. I mean, it's not great. And I know that the response is going to be, Geno's been bad this year, but Jets are not going to have a lot of great options this offseason. The reality is that unless we're talking about drafting a quarterback, which I think is very likely that they're going to do, the odds are very much, you're probably not going to find a guy who is an attractive option in free agency or the trade markets. That doesn't mean you can't find a successful guy. It just means you're going to get a guy whose stock is relatively low, because anybody who's showing something for his current team is probably not going to be available to you. So buying low on Geno Smith, if all it costs is like a day 3 pick, then that's fine. I would not go to day 2 on Geno. I don't even think I'd go high day 3 on Geno to bring him in. I don't know that there's that much value there, but if we're just talking about taking him and his contract, which is again like it's only around $26 million, which that sounds like a lot of money, but we have to consider where quarterback contracts are, where the cap is. It's really not that much money. I think that maybe he's a plausible option if the Raiders are willing to move on, but I think part of the question is, does Pete Carroll stay in Vegas? Because I think Carroll likes Geno. Carroll's the guy that brought him to Seattle. Carroll's the guy that decided to roll with Geno after the Russell Wilson trade. So, I don't know that I don't know how plausible it is. I think it might be, if you're bringing in a stopgap veteran for a rookie, Geno would probably be one of the better options, though. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about a stopgap that failed, Justin Fields. And I think a lot of people want to know, why aren't the Jets trying him at a different position? But there are answers, and I'll explain what they are as we continue here on this Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. You can also get in on the NFL action on FanDuel. Jets coming home to MetLife Stadium this weekend to take on the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons are struggling, but they're still 2.5-point road favorites over the Jets. If you want to get in on the action, FanDuel is the place to do it. Because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. This is the Locked On Jets podcast. Here on this Wednesday, we're doing our weekly mailbag show. Our next question comes from Don, who writes, John, we all know Justin Fields can't throw. Just ask Woody Johnson. Why not bring Fields into the game during periods as a runner, a wildcat quarterback, and maybe let him throw a few to fool the defense? This could help Tyrod Taylor too. What are your thoughts? I think that the change of pace quarterback is one of those things that easier said than done. I mean, so if you go back to like 2008 when the Miami Dolphins really popularized the Wildcat, it wasn't just that they were like snapping the ball to the running back. I mean, part of it's that like nobody was expecting it. So I think it kind of caught the league by surprise, and teams didn't really understand how to defend the single wing, which was kind of what the Dolphins play package was based on. But the Dolphins had like a tight set of plays that complemented each other. So they'd run like one play, and then the second play, they'd fake the first play and then run something different. And then the third play, they'd fake something different and then from the second play and then run a different play. I think that the idea of like shuffling quarterbacks in and out is it's one of those things that I think makes more sense on paper than it does in practice. I think you risk, to the extent Tyrod Taylor can get into a rhythm, you risk messing up that rhythm. I think the teams will probably know that if Fields is coming in, it's like a special running package. So it's not like, I can't say if it happens, it's not the end of the world, but I don't know how effective it would be. And, this kind of brings, this is not the question Don asked, but people ask, well, why aren't the Jets using Justin Fields like maybe a Taysom Hill and converting him to a new position? And the answer to that, I think, is kind of simple, is how many times do we see a draft prospect who's got the physical ability to succeed at a certain position, but can't do it because he doesn't have any of the fundamentals? And these are guys who like play the position in college. So like, a tight end who's like a Zach Kuntz, who's just incredibly athletic, but has none of the fundamentals, or a wide receiver like, Stephen Hill, 6'4" with 4.3 speed, blazing speed, but doesn't have the fundamentals at the position. These are guys who like play the position in college. If you're moving Justin Fields to a new position now where he's got no experience, it's going to be a huge struggle. And these conversion projects where, you move the athletic quarterback to wide receiver or tight end or something, they very rarely work. Occasionally you have a guy who just takes to it immediately, but it's one of the, again, that's another thing that I think is easier said than done. I think that if you want to convert Justin Fields to a new position, it's just really a long shot. And I think part of it's also that you have to have the guy buy in. One of the questions with Tim Tebow, if we want to go back to that era, and probably the last thing you want to hear about is Tim Tebow right now. But people always talked about, well, why wouldn't he be able to work as a tight end? Well, all the stuff I just mentioned is that he really had no background in playing the tight end position, so he was going to have to pretty much start from scratch. And in the NFL, it's hard enough to transition from college, where you're dealing with more complex playbooks, where you're dealing with better athletes, bigger, faster, stronger. You're dealing with football being your full-time job in a way it wasn't in college, extra practice responsibilities, extra meetings. On top of all that, you've got to figure out how to play a new position. That's not exactly easy. But beyond that, I mean, it was clear that when Tebow was here, he never bought into that role. He thought he was coming here. He thought he was going to beat out Mark Sanchez for the starting job. He thought he was going to own New York, win Super Bowls here. It was never part of his plan to be like a hybrid player. And you saw that from how he approached it. I mean, there was even a game late that season when the Jets benched Mark Sanchez, but it was for Greg McElroy, and Tebow pretty much asked off the punt team after that. I don't know that Fields would buy in. My guess is that Fields still is trying to make it work as a quarterback. Will he be able to? Well, he hasn't been able to for 5 years, but I think that he probably still views himself as a quarterback. And if that's the way he views it, you're not going to get him to really commit to it. I mean, you could tell him to go practice there, but if it's going to work, if you're going to make a rapid improvement, if you're going to learn how to play a new position, the player really needs to believe in what you're doing. And I don't think that would work for Fields. Our next question: given the difficulty many players and positions face in adjusting to distinct NFL rules, such as 2 feet in bounds, eligible receivers, and considering the flashy, high-scoring appeal of the college game, why does the NFL not adopt key aspects of the NCAA rulebook? This alignment could potentially ease the professional transition to players, leading to better early career performance and ultimately a faster paced, more exciting product, especially in light of current NFLPA mandated restrictions on intense practice time. So I think this question deals with something I talked about a lot, and that's the difficulty in evaluating offensive linemen in particular, and the difficulty in developing offensive linemen in particular. And that's because the rules in college are different from the rules in the NFL. In college, you are allowed to go 3 yards down the field before you get flagged for being an ineligible receiver as an offensive lineman. And the NFL, it's only 1 yard. And what that means essentially is that it's way easier to run screens in college because you can get your lineman much further down the field as the pass is thrown. You can get your guys 3 yards down the field, which makes it easier for them to hit blocks than in the NFL, where you can only go 1 yard down the field. It also opens up a lot in the run pass option game, because NFL teams have to be kind of conservative with the way they block run pass options. Because again, if the quarterback decides to throw the ball and you've driven your guy 5 yards down the field, you're an ineligible receiver. I guess if you drive your guy 5 yards down the field, you're still ineligible in college. But if you drive your guy 3 yards down the field, you're not. So you can be more aggressive in your run blocking on RPO. So this means screens and RPOs are easier to run in college, and you can make them a much bigger part of your playbook than you can in the NFL. So what all this means is that you have far fewer natural dropbacks in college, which is kind of like the bread and butter of an NFL passing game, where the quarterback's getting in the pockets. You have far fewer of them because you can just run RPOs and screens all day long. And that means that players are not really prepared all that well to enter the NFL as offensive linemen. And I think there are probably other spots where you can say it's true. So the question is, why does the NFL not adopt these rules that could make a more offensive friendly game? And my answer to that is, wait a few years. I think they're going to do it, because if you follow NFL history, I feel like I'm really interested by the history of the NFL, so I read up on this stuff. One thing that's been clear throughout the 100-plus year history of the league is that the league will always move towards adopting rules that increase offense. It's been a constant trend. The league thinks that, and is probably right, that high-scoring games are what attract fans. And that's why you see rules like today where you can barely breathe on a receiver before you get an illegal contact penalty. It's why you can't touch it's why the roughing the passer rules have become so strictly enforced. And so I think we'll see it. I don't know why they haven't done it yet, but I would not be surprised. In fact, I'd be surprised if these rules were not eventually adopted, because the NFL loves high scoring offenses. And again, if there are two things that have been true over the course of the century plus history of the league, they're this. Number one, the league always adopts rules to increase scoring. And number two, people always complain that it's not real football anymore like it was 30 years ago. People complain this isn't in today's game. People complain, oh, it's not like real football like it was in the 90s. Well, in the 90s, people were complaining, oh, it wasn't real football like it was in the 60s. And in the 60s, people were complaining, oh, it wasn't like real football. This isn't real football like we had in the 30s. And a lot of this basis of this is that the rules change to increase offense. And at the end of the day, it's frustrating, when the roughing the passer rules are what they are, because you see these really ticky-tack flags that get thrown during games. But the league's willing to deal with a couple of those in order for the broader goal, which is to increase offense. And I think you have to say the league has been very successful in that. So to answer the question, give it a couple of years. I think we're going to see it. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and you're listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow on Thanksgiving with Crossover Thursday. I'll be joining Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons to preview Jets Falcons. Talk to you then.